Hello and welcome to the first in 2025, the full statistical meta breakdown. Of course, we are using the data from all of the kickoff tournaments that have happened in the 4 tier 1 regions. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. Today, we're going to go through 4 of the maps. Tomorrow, we will go through the other 3 and then talk about the overall data as well. So if you want to find out who statistically the best and worst agents are in the game, then you'll find out tomorrow. But today we're going to focus on the 4 first alphabetical maps, and that means starting off with Abyss. Now, for those of you who've never seen one of these videos and how it works, let me just go through some of the things you need to know. So we're going to go through 3 slides for each of the maps. We're going to start with a team comp, so talking about some of the most popular team comps. Here at the top, you can see how many comps it is out of overall. So this is 40 games of Abyss. Abyss, by the way, was the most played map in all of the kickoff tournaments, and it really did feel like it. I'm so glad that Abyss is rotating out. However, you will see, yeah, 3 kind of comps that I've chosen that are either popular or kind of interesting for one reason or another. And then here you've got their non-mirror win rate. Anytime you see the words NM, that means non-mirror. That means that basically if this comp at the top played against this comp here, the second one, that would be a non-mirror game. Let's dive into talking about Abyss. And here are the comps that we can see. The most popular comp on Abyss, to play no sentinel, right? To play double smokes, double initiator, a duelist, no sentinel. And you can see this is the most popular version of that, kind of the most standard version, you might say. The second most popular version, kind of the DRX comp if you want, or kind of like an Ascent-esque comp, I think I called it in the next slide, is this, right? Which again, did okay. It seems pretty good. And then down here, I've got kind of a double duelist comp. This is something that Gen G were playing last year. Didn't go so well, as you can see by the non-mirror win rate just there. But let's move on to our second slide, and for this second slide we're really going to be talking about archetypes, right? So this is essentially like different ways of building a team comp. As you can see here down at the bottom, you've got the list of what these types of comps are, right? So Ascent-esque is your, you know, we're playing a sentinel, we're playing a duelist, we're playing 2 initiators and a smoke, right? Think the Ascent meta comp. It doesn't necessarily have to be KO and Sova, but just that kind of comp here you can see. And then you've got the pick rate and then non-mirror win rate. So you can see that all of the Ascent-esque comps were 48.75% of the overall pick rate, so the most popular archetype essentially. And they did, you know, slightly below average in terms of the non-mirror win rate overall. And then you've got here across the bottom double duelists, the double initiators, and double smokes comp, so a no sentinel comp just here. Then you've got some of the what I've just classified as other, which is, you know, for instance, Team Vitality's triple initiator comp. And then you've got the double smokes with a sentinel, so this would be a comp where you're only playing 1 initiator and you're playing double smokes as well. So those are the different archetypes that we got here on Abyss, and you can see that the most kind of prevalent one in terms of win rate, apart from the others, which obviously are being carried somewhat by Team Vitality and some of their wins, are the double initiator plus smokes. And so we saw that the most popular comp overall was one of these. And even though, you know, it is only about a quarter of the games, I would expect if Abyss were to stick around that this number would go up because the win rate is pretty good. And I do think that that probably is the best way of playing the map. And then our third slide for each of these maps is just the agent win rate. So this is looking at individual agents down the left here with their pick rates and then their non-mirror win rates. So that is how this works. And in terms of things here on Abyss, you can see that Astra is actually more popular than Omen these days, which might surprise some of you. But with the Astra buff, that seems to have taken hold. In terms of some of the win rate stuff, there isn't too much to look at here. You know, it is Abyss. It is pretty standard, I would say, across the board, right? A lot of Sova, a lot of Jett, a lot of KO, you know, expected stuff. KO is doing pretty well. That is one thing you can point out. And what I really want to focus on here is the duelist battle between Jett and Yoru, because you can see that Jett is vastly outperforming Yoru. And I think that when you think about this map and how to play this map, that actually does make some sense. And remember, I'm saying this as someone who generally is a pretty big Jett hater, and I don't like Jett for the most part. And I do really like Yoru, but I think that Abyss is the kind of exception. Let me explain why. So first, let's start off talking about Yoru and kind of some of the defensive things here with Yoru. Because Yoru, one of the main advantages, of course, you think, is the fast rotates, right? We can get across the map. But the thing is, the way the map is laid out, you don't often see, you know, a kind of Yoru TP ending up in kind of the perfect spot for where you want to rotate, right? It's not like on Haven where, you know, you can send a TP out from A and end it up all the way back at C and be feeling pretty good about where you are. You know, that doesn't quite exist nearly as much here, and so you end up with more TPs that look like this one here for BBL. And so you don't necessarily have that maybe fast full rotation. And the thing is as well, another part of like Yoru on Haven is that you're gonna get quite aggressive towards A lot of the time, and then if they're not there, then you TP across to C, and it makes sense. Well, here on Abyss, you know, being aggressive just, I mean, especially here on B is very, very difficult, right? You have to commit a hell of a lot to this if you want to actually, you know, make this even semi-successful a lot of the time. And even aggroing on A, it just, again, it just feels maybe not the best. And again, if you don't have that TP all the way across the map, you know, anytime you do aggro down here, well, they're just going to run to the side and feel pretty good about the round that they're in. So maybe Yoru doesn't have quite the defensive capabilities that he does on some other maps. And also, there is another problem with Yoru on the attack side, which is sometimes if your timing isn't perfect, you can end up with an exec that looks like Fnatic's here.
The site clearance is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, there's a lot of spots that you can't feel as comfy in holding, one of which might be where Loon is, if not for the gate crash that he can quickly fall back to up in heaven. That may be needed. Guided salvo underway. Rocket's not going to take Loon out of position, though. Ult used now.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong, this is really bad by Fnatic, but I do think that this is the kind of thing that you will see, you know, somewhat fairly often from Yoru teams, right? Where you're TPing maybe is quite obvious, and if the defensive team knows what's going on and where that's going to happen, you just end up with your Yoru dying, you know, way away from the team. You know, no one is in position to potentially get a trade-off on that, and you're just in a really bad spot. Whereas I think when you take a look at Jett and some of the advantages that Jett has on this map, they are quite plentiful, right? Of course, you get the kind of, you know, drifting off the map kind of exec style if you want to. But one of the main things I think that Jett can do is take advantage of the verticality on the map. There are multiple positions where if you're updraft dashing in here as Jett, there are, you know, multiple places on both B and A that you can really take advantage of that. And you can get a supreme advantage from doing that. And the smokes will help you survive through it as well to give your teammates time to get up and trade you. And we'll see a good example of that here from DRX.
I thought it was pretty good, but it wasn't quite at the level that I was hoping to see at kickoff with some of the top teams, you know, the team util, the combos, things like that. However, if you look at how he sets it up for himself and for the execute itself, they're very well aware of the fact that the timing's just a little bit delayed for Teo utility. So they always push right up into that smoke, up towards that line of scrimmage, so they can instantly flood the site when the util goes out. Once again, there it is. Yeah, come in now on top of the salvo, and there's the instant kill. I mean, it's just utter chaos when the bombs start falling down.
So that is Abyss. It does seem like Jett is the superior choice over Yoru on that map, but now let's move on to talking about Bind. And unfortunately for us, Bind is rotating out, just as Bind was getting interesting, because for the past couple of years, I've had to talk about Bind, and everyone's just playing basically the same comp, maybe slightly different initiators, and it's very dull. But we finally got some different kind of comps that you can see in front of you right here. You know, our top comp here has a Vice and no Viper. Here, the second comp, you've kind of got an old school, you know, what everyone used to play with the Viper, double initiator. And then here at the bottom, you've got double Sentinel, no Viper, right? We're seeing quite a bit of difference in terms of, you know, hey, let's play double Sentinel. Hey, let's play, you know, no Sentinel. Hey, let's play one Sentinel. You know, all of those kind of things. We finally had some interesting things happening on Bind, but unfortunately, Bind is now rotating, which is very, very sad. If you take a look, and this is going to be true for pretty much all of the maps, by the way, the top most picked comp, which will always be at the top here, is never really that high. Right? It's never going to be super, super high, as it isn't here with only 8 out of 66 games. But now let's get into the interesting thing about Bind, which is the archetypes. Because you can see here with the archetypes, we got no Senti Viper here, which still is the most popular in terms of pick rate here at 37%. Not doing quite as well, but not too far under 50%. Double Senti at 50%, and no Viper Senti, you know, around 50% as well. You know, both of these fairly popular, you would say. You know, these are still seeing quite a bit of play. But the one I really want to talk about is this Gen G style. Now, I've called it Gen G because this is the comp that Gen G were playing all of last year. It's actually what they're not playing this year. But in 2024, you know, Gen G on Bind basically throughout the entire season played with a Viper and a Cypher, right? And I think the more modern version of that, which I personally believe is the best comp on Bind, only one team ran it. And that was Crew. And Crew were running this comp with a Brim Raze, Sky, and then Viper Vice. And I think that that is the comp that if Bind was sticking around, I would say to most teams, like, hey, you should probably run that comp because it gives you the best of both worlds, right? If you're playing double Senti or you're playing without a Viper, that makes it pretty hard for your Brim because your Brim now is your only smokes. And if your Brim is on the wrong side of the map on defense side, that means you just got no smokes to stop an exec, right? And they're going to have that advantage over you. But if you're still playing a Viper and you're playing the Vice obviously gives you so much defensive stability, you know, really can hold down a site extremely well on a map like Bind. And also for post plants, just basically means that you win most or if not all of your post plants as well. Still gives you a flank watch if you want, or at least a threat of flank watch, which might make flanking, you know, less of an option for your opponent as well. So I do think that that is the best way of playing Bind and what I would have recommended, but unfortunately Bind is rotating out pretty soon. And coming ahead and looking at the agents, there isn't too much to talk about here overall. Brim's pick rate isn't as high as it has been in the past. We have seen some teams going for Astra, particularly if they aren't playing Viper, right? To try and overcome maybe that option of, you know, Brim being on the wrong part of the map on defense side. If you take a look, Viper's pick rate is definitely down, as we've talked about, as you could probably guess from looking at some of the archetypes. The win rates here, there aren't too many win rate things to look at, maybe other than Vice, right? That Vice is doing very well and that, you know, Vice is an agent that you probably should be playing. And Vice in general, by the way, is going to be doing pretty well on quite a few of these maps. Okay, now let's come ahead and look at Fracture instead. And unlike Bind, Fracture doesn't quite have the kind of archetype difference. You'll see a lot of what you're going to see here from kind of the main and second comps I've got here, which is, you know, double Initiator, Sentinel, Raze, Brim, right? That's most of what you're going to see on Fracture in some form or another. You know, the Initiators might change slightly, the Sentinel might change slightly, but for the most part, that is what you're going to see. The one I do want to highlight here, though, is this second comp, which, again, I probably think is the correct way to go on Fracture right now, or at least one of the ways, certainly. You know, playing Vice, again, you can see this is won every single game that it is played, and I think is, yeah, just a pretty good way of going about Fracture. So, as I said, the archetype difference maybe isn't fully there, and you can see that. I've called them EG comps, because obviously, you know, back in the day when EG were playing double Initiator with the Sova and whatever, I've just called them EG, but that kind of standard comp you can see is making up, you know, 81% of the overall meta, right? So we are in a heavy kind of, you know, standardized, you know, archetype, you would say, for Fracture here. Double Duelist making up a bit, but not doing too great. Double Smokes, I think this was only one game. It did win, but it's only one game. And then the Double Senti as well was maybe a couple games. And again, basically, we are just looking at one real archetype here. And you can see in some of the pick rates here of how the map is going in general, right? Ton of Brim, ton of Breach, as you might suspect. A lot of Raze, as you might suspect, but obviously some Neon still getting in there as well. And then really, you know, Teo's pick rate is pretty significant here, right? 47% on Fracture. That's quite a lot of games for the new agent, of course. And then really the difference comes in what Sentinel you want to pick. But I do want to highlight, although Vice didn't get to 10 games and therefore is grayed out here, you know, Vice did win 7 out of the 8 games. And I do think that Vice is a very good option, as we'll now see from a clip from Sentinels. So if we take a look at this clip from G2 versus Sen are on the defensive side, and you're going to see, you know, just some of the strengths of Vice coming in as G2 go for kind of a faster B-exec. You see that Jogmo here, you know, doesn't really want to go too far. He's eventually going to have to come in, but he has to wait for his teammates because perhaps he's scared about, you know, the wall. You get the Thorns coming up here, making it harder for G2 as well. You see the wall there just completely blocking this off. And then you're going to see the other thing that, you know, I think is very strong from Vice on this map, which is the ult, right? The ult and the circle obviously is the same as a Killjoy ult, and we know some of the Killjoy ults on this map are very, very strong. Well, that too is going for Vice, right? And being able to get rid of those guns is very strong, and I do think that, you know, just in general, Vice is a very good option on Fracture, and I think as time goes on, we'll start to see more and more Vice on Fracture, because of course, being able to stop execs, you know, in their tracks on Fracture sounds like a pretty good idea. Okay, and then finally, we have Haven, and unfortunately, Haven has kind of become, you know, a fairly boring map for the most part as well in terms of some of the things that we're seeing. Up at the top here, you've got a fairly high, this is probably one of the higher pick rates you'll see for the most played comp, right, at 31%, which is, you know, a fairly standard comp. It should be said that Cypher has replaced Killjoy, and we'll see that in the agent pick rates as well. Obviously, you got then the Fnatic comp is a bit of a difference, and you've also got the double smokes comp with the Viper, which Gen G are still running here on Haven as well as kind of, you know, a comp as, you know, that's a bit more out there as well. alongside the kind of Fnatic comp. Moving on to the archetypes though, and those kind of are the archetypes. You know, you've got basically what is just the normal meta, right, that has been for a very long time on Haven. You've got the kind of Fnatic comps, and then you've got the kind of double smokes comp. But you can see that really it is just pretty much all the meta, with some teams playing Fnatic and some teams playing double smokes. And then with the agents as well, there isn't too much to talk about because, you know, so many of the agents are just picked all the time, right? Omen, super high. Breach, super high. Sova, super high. Even Cypher, super high, right? The only real difference is, you know, what duelist you're picking. Of course, we have seen some ISO, we have seen some Yoru, we have seen, you know, some Jett and Neon in here. But for the most part, you know, it's not a ton, right? It really isn't that many overall. And the only thing to talk about is that Cypher definitely is the better option over Killjoy. This started towards the end of last year as well, where Cypher did start to dominate Killjoy on Haven, and that has continued into this year, and more people are picking Cypher, and it seems like more and more people are picking the correct one, because Cypher, it does look like, is the best option on Haven. So that was the stats for today. As I say, we'll go into tomorrow and talk about the other 3 maps we haven't talked about so far, and then also the overall data as well, and what agents are doing well and what agents aren't doing so well. So stay tuned for that.